Good evening, Bhuvaneshwar, learned dignitaries and my friends. My name is Arnab. I'm a tech entrepreneur from Kolkata, and I will be spending next 15 minutes with you with son of the soil, a son from Odisha, Satyakam Mohanty. We'll spend next 15 minutes how the journey looks like for a startup from a local to global. What are the opportunities and challenges we see? We will take certain case studies with a very successful software product story that Satyakam has built, exited, a very successful exit to one among India's top 5 software exporter. We will talk about how a data scientist is transitioning to an investment journey, how this investment could really fuel a startup from being local to global. So next 15 minutes, let's hear. While we'll touch base most of the sections, last 3 minutes we'll keep the floor open. Ask us anything. Let's start, Satyakam.
Is everyone awake? I hear one. I will repeat my question.
We'll get plenty.
Is Bhuvaneshwar awake? Oh, thank you. Over to you.
So let's start as a startup on the scale meter as they move from ideation to commercialization. How do you see the innovation and the improvisation as a serious pillar in this transition?
So, to build, to become an entrepreneur is to innovate. If you think that you can build something that is lasting, that makes a difference without innovation as a pillar, then you're fooling yourself, right? So that's a given, that's table stakes. I want to take a slightly long view on this to give you an example of what I'm talking about. See, when we are, all of us know about cyclones, especially in this state, we know about cyclones, right? Now, in a cyclonic storm, there's something called the eye, right? The eye is the center of the storm. Now, if you had fallen asleep and there was a cyclone that formed, and you woke up in its eye, you'd feel nothing. You'll have no idea what's happening. Now, history tells us that when significant events happen, we're typically in that eye. We do not know what is happening till it has happened, because hindsight is 20/20, right? Now, coming to the point, 20 years ago, or about 25 years ago, the internet hit us. The world existed before it, commerce existed before it. Internet came and changed the world. Fundamentally, right? Everything we are talking about today stems either from internet or is connected fundamentally to the internet. And what was the foundational thing there? The foundational thing was that it democratized access to information. It made it irrelevant whether you are sitting in Santa Clara or Sambalpur. You had access to the same information. We are at another such moment right now. AI is the 4th industrial revolution. It will touch everything and everyone. What will that do foundationally? It will take away something that today, individually and collectively, we hold very dear. When we sit in society, right, we pride in the skills that we bring to the table. That's what separates us from our neighbor. What AI is going to do over the next 5 years, it is going to foundationally remove that as a barrier. It will level the playing field. If you're a doctor with an idea, but you don't know how to code, today you can't do much. You need your engineer friend to come help you. 5 years down the line, you're going to probably go to some form of website, click a few buttons, as a domain expert, lay out, hey, A, B, C, D things I want this thing to do, and your app is going to be ready. Right? The converse may also become true, by the way, right? That you could have AI performing diagnosis. It already is doing that. So, long story short, when foundational skills will no longer be a differentiating factor, what will we go back to?
So you're talking about a transition from a volume game to a value game.
So, if you look at the greatest value creation, it is always the value game, right? Now, sometimes volume is the value, not to take away from that. But with the reduction in barriers, in what you can build, how you can build, what skills you came to the world with or came to the table, when you take all that away, your ideas, your domain knowledge, your problem-solving skills, those fundamentals is what we will return to. So to your point, everybody who's sitting here, if you think of the world ahead and what needs to be solved, you have got to go back to core strengths. You can't bank on learnable skills, because I can tell you in 5 years, AI is going to learn them faster and better than you.
So coming to a different aspect, Satyakam, as we are talking of local to global, which is slightly different from the priorities or from getting GCCs. We just heard government dignitaries talking about GCCs. So we are trying to touch base the other important pillar in the ecosystem, the SMEs, MSMEs, who have an aspiration from being a local to global to have this ride. What do you think would be the key intrinsic opportunities for these local players to be the global ones? How do you see this transition? You talked about value, you talked about AI as a boom or the rider that's going to create a disruption. How you think the local players should scale and elevate in this value journey and become a global one?
So that I'm going to break that down into two parts. Right? The first part is, why would you get a seat at the table? Right? What is the value you're creating? So you have to, just saying I'm going to be there and I want to be global is not enough unless you're creating a seat for yourself at the table, which means innovation, which means ideas, which means potentially IP creation, all of that come into play. That's one part of it. Now, in India, actually, that's something we're not too bad at. We can actually build. So we have a lot of inventors amongst us. Lots, right? What we don't have enough of is people who can translate that into successful businesses, right? At a global level. So, it's one thing to get to an MSME level, and it's another thing to take it global. What's the difference? The difference is the perspective you need to bring other than your core expertise. So what does it take to build a global business, right? So to even start with, which is the table you need to be at? Who are the people at that table? What are the connections you're making with them? How are you making those connections, right? Are you out there talking to people? A lot of times you'll find people say, hey, it's a waste of my time. I'm going to focus on building my business. But how are you going to build your business if you're not talking to the world?
Oh yes, that's very important. So while IP is something very close to my heart, but I cannot discount how important is to have a community, how important is to have influences, how important is to have partnerships. It's not easy for being a local to global. There are certain things. So what do you think? So you had a very successful founder's journey. Now you are wearing a different hat as an investor. What will be your... So let us take an instance that what you would have done as a founder, which you could not have done it, but in an investor's eyes, what you want the companies, which may or may not be your portfolio, what will be your one-liner?
I will extend everything I was just saying to say I will connect with the world more. I would connect with each of the stakeholders. Customers, employees, investors, right, society at large, because today at the pace at which the world is changing, whatever we build has a shorter and shorter shelf life. So if you build it in a vacuum, I can guarantee you it is going to be obsolete by the time you're ready to go to market, unless you're part of these conversations.
I am aware of that. You always try to play a contra play. I also try to learn some of the things. There is something called always a pivot and repivot. So we were talking the other day. So in between, for all of you consumption, Satyakam always play a contra card in his all journeys. He was talking about something called service as a software, which is a contra of SaaS. A typical model. So what about these pivots and repivots? Can you throw some lights?
So, see, what is a pivot? If you think about it, a pivot is an acknowledgement that the world that I was building for, the problem that I was building for, has shifted. Right? Now, we can be bullheaded and say, no, I'm going to continue doing what I was doing, or recognize that that problem statement has changed or the world has shifted. The world that was going to, that needed that problem solved. And making that shift is the pivot. So, a lot of times you do hear that, or you used to, no longer so much anymore, but you used to hear, company made a pivot. It was almost like they failed at what they were doing. Okay? That's no longer the case anymore. Now, if you make a pivot, I think the world recognizes that you are nimble, you're agile, and you are recognizing, what needs solving and solving that.
Now, we are slightly on the fag end of our discussion. Moving it back to your favorite, which is core to your heart now. Investment, a very key strategy in a company's journey at various levels, whether it's ideation, commercialization, scaling up. How do you see the role of investment in this local to global journey for companies which also is looking for a scale?
So, the investor has an absolutely critical role to play, right? The whole romance of bootstrapping a business, I did that, by the way, right? I bootstrapped my business. But I couldn't make it a global business because, the bootstrapping journey is a 100-year journey. If you want to be a Meta or a Microsoft or a whoever, right? You need to be able to constantly find funding to make those orbital shifts, right?
That's correct.
So now, if you think about it, so the investor becomes a very critical component. Now, if you think about it, what does the investor need? The investor needs obviously something that they can make a return on. Now, if you think about, I'm going to narrow it down actually a little bit now to how we are seeing the world, right? So we at Wyser Capital, so that's me and my co-founder Supriya, who was here on the stage a few minutes ago, both of us come from operator backgrounds. We are not your traditional VCs, right? So why are we in here? We are in here because as operators, as inventors and founders, which, we've done all of those three roles, we believe we have a very unique perspective to where the world of AI is going. Right? And I'll spend a minute on that for a second. Now, and because of that, we are coming in as, unlike the first generation of investors who would invest in a very broad-based spectrum of opportunities, we are coming in very laser focus. We're looking at the world of enterprise AI, and even within the world of enterprise AI, we're looking at the world of agentic AI. Okay? Now, I don't know how many folks here are familiar with agentic AI. Agentic AI is if I were to start with what we know today, which is generative AI, right? If you take generative AI, which essentially is the ability of AI to synthesize information of various kind, process it, make sense of it, and being able to give you a synthesis, a summary, sometimes an insight. That is where the world is today. For that capability to become useful for an organization or a company, it needs to be able to convert that into a completed task. So what is missing? So if I go into a fundamental, almost like an architectural view today, you have your foundational model, you will have your external memory, your RAG layer, you have your model. This is where the world is at today, right? And you use that to therefore deploy it in your company. Now, for it to perform tasks for you, you need two more layers. You need a planning layer, you need a reasoning layer. These are very greenfield areas. There's work to be done here. But long story short, when you add this back, what you have is a true AI agent, which means that it can perform a task on its own. And a set of these together, what we'll call in future a multi-agent system, will perform a process on their own. And they will perform it like a human, making those decisions, making those trade-offs. Imagine a procurement process for marketing. The marketing guy wants the best outcome. The procurement guy wants it at the lowest cost. There is inherent conflict. How does a machine solve for that conflict? Right? We already have the conceptual and classical grounding in game theory, for example. So you imagine you have these AI agents that are coming together, operating just like how humans would. When you get to that point, you have truly a transformational world in front of you. We at Wyser are betting on that world. And we believe that the way we talk about generative AI today, the way we talk about LLMs today, 5 years from now, the world will be an agentic AI world. And that's our bet.
Perfect. Honoring the time, we have to conclude. Thank you, Bhuvaneshwar. I know you have a 2036 plan on IT. You have a subset plan of 2047 Vikshit Bharat. I heard Honorable IT Secretary talking about data annotations, creating data sets, large language models. It's not quite often we heard from the policymakers. I'm sure, Satyakam, son of the soil, you will have a lot more to commit for the state. But for today, we are winding up. If any specific questions, we can take. Otherwise, we can wind it up. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.